Hello and welcome to the Move Your Business Forward podcast. These talks are hosted by Rob Boll, founder of Evoke Management and CEO of International Leaders UK. He'll be talking with experts from both these companies about issues that affect SME companies today.
This podcast is one of a series that we're doing talking about the big squeeze, and the focus today is going to be on why you must protect your margin. All businesses at the moment are facing similar issues: inflation, supply chain, and issues with recruitment. And all these things are putting more and more pressure on businesses, and the margin that businesses are able to make and maintain is super important to really have that focus on. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm joined here by two of my colleagues at Evoke. Nick, he's one of our part-time directors with a focus on commercials, and Robert, one of my part-time directors at Evoke, who's also focused on finance and commercials around that. So all of us have got lots of experience of working with SMEs, talking to businesses, their management team, the owners, and yeah, we're going to talk about margin today. So Nick, welcome and thanks for joining me today. What would be your initial thoughts around protecting margin? Anything that you're seeing at the moment you think is really important for businesses?
Thanks, Rob, and good to be on the podcast. I had a very interesting conversation very recently with the COO of a very large UK restaurant chain, and he told me that for the last 12 months they've been preparing themselves for a dramatic increase in energy costs. He put a number on it in the region of about £7 million per annum, which obviously makes a huge difference to the profitability of that entity. So, you know, they put processes in 12 months ago to start negotiating with providers. Obviously, the number of providers out there are significantly more limited than they were before, and there's no cap on commercial energy costs. So it's a huge issue for them, and it's taken a lot of planning. And I'm sure you would say, Rob, that SMEs, you know, perhaps they're as quick off the mark, but possibly not.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it, you say that, because big companies have lots of people around to think about these things and plan 12 months ago. SMEs don't have that, and it's often reactive rather than proactive. So, Robert, are you thinking similar?
Yeah, absolutely. So many SMEs are just purely focused on sales. You know, am I doing well because my sales are going up? Few of them will actually look at the margin and say, hey, yeah, my sales are going up, but then they're told, you know, 3 months later when they get quarterly accounts, that their margin's gone down because their cost of sales has gone up and their overheads are spiraling. So what might look like a success at the top line is certainly not a success at the bottom line.
So protecting margin then, Nick, what's your immediate kind of top tips on protecting margin? There's clearly things that we can't control, but there are controllables. So what can businesses be thinking about in terms of protecting that margin?
Well, I'm picking up on what Robert's just said. You know, there are many businesses where there is effectively a ceiling on price of the product. You know, whether that be market forces, whether that be competition. You know, within financial services, there's an accepted rate for certain products and services above which it's extremely difficult to push above. So then it's a case of looking at the work processes and looking at how efficient the work processes are. So coming back to Robert's point about bottom line, you know, short of generating twice as many customers at the same price, then you've got to look at the work processes and look for inefficiencies. So coming back to my restaurant analogy, a friend of mine was asked to go in and look at a hotel restaurant business, one hotel, one restaurant. And one of the first things he noticed was that the kitchen team were coming in at 9 o'clock in the morning and putting all 4 ovens on, not using them till about 11:30, 12, and turning them off at 11 o'clock at night, which, you know, is a huge inefficiency, and with increased costs, completely unnecessary. So his recommendation, very straightforward, was that you need to be using your tools more efficiently than you are, and that will dramatically reduce costs. I think it's the same with any business. So it could be corporate entertainment, it could be travel expenses, it could be attendance at conferences. You know, there's any number of things which may be quite ordinary in the course of business historically, but perhaps need to be looked at much more closely going forward.
Just interesting thing on that, Nick, because I think one of the things SMEs have as an advantage is you can generally see everything that's going on. You're not a big corporate where people can hide away and you don't see what's going on. But I think part of this strive for better margin is educating everyone in the business how important this is, and they can play their part. You know, someone in a kitchen just being more efficient with use of the power, the lights, the gas, whatever it is, can have an impact. And I think everyone in the business has got a place to play. And I think what management needs to do is educate and look at how do we improve things? How do we improve our margin across everything we do, and just get people into those mindset. Rob, what's your thoughts on that team effort?
Well, it's an absolute team effort. I think if you can instill that in all your staff, I mean, we're all, as domestic consumers of electricity, we're all running around switching things off, taking them off standby. You know, all those things we're being preached on. Make common sense. Apply that in that workspace. Just because it's not your money that's being spent, just get the frame of mind right. And so often, savings or wastage and things that could be cut are known by the people at the bottom, right? But you know, you've got to ask them, what are your cost saving suggestions? That, you know, they've got the experience and they know what's happening day to day. They're watching the wheel go round on the electric meter, you know, whatever it is. They'll be aware of things that we can save and that things aren't essential. And I think one thing that lockdown taught us was that people stopped everything. They stopped spending because they didn't have any money, and you know, reset and rebuild from the bottom up. Is it just because we have this subscription, we buy that, we go to trade fairs, we do all this traveling, you know, we've been doing it for 3 or 4 years. Is it actually necessary? Try and measure a return on an activity. What if we didn't do that? Would it make any difference to sales, for example?
One would hope it would be easier for management to get that message around in the current climate, because it's so well publicized. We all know that inflation's going to be at, you know, a historical high. We all know that energy bills are increasing dramatically. So getting that message around the company, you know, theoretically shouldn't be as difficult as perhaps it has in the past, where the staff are perhaps not overly clear as to why there's a cost-cutting exercise going on.
Yeah, and I think, because I mean, primarily it's around energy and fuel prices. Be aware, it's, you know, whilst you're beating yourself up saying our costs have gone up, so are your competitors' costs. You've just got to make sure that you've got more of a handle on it than your competitor. And also, it's going to be happening to your suppliers. So don't be naive. You know, there's going to be pressure, and you've got to find a way of either resisting that pressure on the cost prices, or look for alternative ways of acquiring the same costs of materials.
Well, let's break that down a little bit. So let's think about, there's two ways to improve margins. Obviously, selling higher at a better price. The other is buying what you're buying, or the consumables into that product or service, getting that down as well. So let's think about the price we're selling. You used this phrase earlier, Robert, selling smarter. So what would be your top tips to improve the price that you're selling at, which is going to have a direct impact on your margin? What would you be doing with your finance?
So I would be saying, right, if we were to put our prices up another 5% higher than our competitor, a known price at the moment, because chances are they'll put their prices up, how do you sell the differential? Right, is it to do with quality of materials or something like that, or is it to do with the after sales service, the no quibble refunds, perhaps a warranty, anything that you can package up together with the actual item that is an intangible but nevertheless gives customer satisfaction?
Nick, any thoughts around that, the selling smarter approach?
Yeah, I mean, from a commercial director's perspective, it's crucial to do some forensic analysis of your competition. If you don't know where you sit in the market, and you don't fully understand your competitors' offerings, it's extremely difficult to differentiate your product or service. And you know, as Robert says, there could be a number of things which could be put in place relatively cheaply, which could increase market share just because you've created a differentiator which your customers want. I mean, it could be operating, you know, 2 hours longer during the day than your competitors. Now, there's a cost to that, but the return in increased market share by being accessible outside of the normal operating hours of your competitors, you know, could be a huge advantage and could generate additional sales. May or may not, but without understanding how your competitors operate and really understand their offering, then you know, trying to find those factors that Robert's listed is quite difficult.
I think also just having the direct conversations with your customers and saying, look, we are going to have to put our prices up. You know, it's not as if they're suddenly going to go to someone else and get a better price. Everyone's having to do this. I've got a relatively small investment in a pie business, and this issue's come up. The ingredients for pies, the meat, everything is going up. The cost of doing baking pies, the energy cost is going up. Staff, it's impossible to get staff as easy as it was to. We're having to pay people more. And we have had to go and have the conversations with customers and say, look, we've got to put the price up. And it's not a question of we're just going to see what we can get away with. It's the price is this. And if you're not willing to buy it at that, we're not making any money. We're not covering what we need to and profit. Therefore, we're not going to do it. And these conversations have to happen. And it's not as if we're making this up. It's the truth. And the important thing is just getting in there early, having the conversations, and also not locking in a too long-term a price as well. I think having the relationship with a customer, you can say, look, we're going to have to put the price up because of all these things that have gone up, and we need to be profitable. Otherwise, we're not going to do it. But let's review it. Let's review it on a quarterly basis, on a monthly, whatever's appropriate for your business. It doesn't have to be in place forever, but it's communicating and explaining and making sure that it happens, because I think a lot of people are afraid to put their price up, but you have to. There's no point in continuing with a particular product or service knowing you're losing money, because you're just going to cripple your business and there's going to be bigger issues ahead.
Which is where management reporting is so crucial to the management team, and understanding the dynamics of each and every customer, understanding how the business is broken down by customer segment, customer type, understanding which customer types are more profitable than others. And as you say, there may well be historical trading relationships which no longer make sense and possibly could be renegotiated because it's a long-standing relationship.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think without that insight, understanding which customers are more profitable than others anyway, where you might not be making any margin anyway, you've got to cut some of these customers and say that we're not going to do it anymore. We just can't. And product services, what are the most profitable products you've got, the most profitable services? It just makes some harsh decisions. You might have to cut some of those or change the way you're delivering on those to protect that margin. So we talked a little bit about improving the price. The other side of the equation is the cost to us. Buying smarter. Any particular thoughts on this initially, Nick, from a commercial perspective?
Yeah, I think again, it's a case of understanding your market, whether that be your customers or your suppliers. Having a really good field of view, a really detailed perspective of the landscape in which you're trading. That's essential, both from a customer and a supplier perspective. Great,
Robert. Any thoughts on?
Yeah, well, as you can imagine from the finance side, things I like, for example, and if I take a pizza company as an example, literally we came up with the list of ingredients that are on the menu. We went out to 3 different suppliers and say, I want you to price that up, right, and commit to it for the next 6 months, right? And by the way, we are doing this right across the board to all our suppliers and to new suppliers. So they knew they were going to be a competitive tender.
Yeah.
Right. And it actually brought prices, the overall costs. We made a cost saving of 1.5%, where we were expecting a 12% increase overall, and it just then enabled us to literally cherry pick. That is to say, cherry tomatoes from that supplier, carrots from this one. So do an audit, put them in a competitive situation.
And this is stuff you should be doing anyway, right? It's not just because we're going through some challenging times, but it's more important now than ever to keep on it.
That just continue buying the same thing from the same supplier without going out to the market and testing it.
Yeah. I think the other thing here is working with your supply chain, right? Because everyone's got the same issues, and it's going, look, ultimately, if you have got a product or service where there's a finite up price you can get in the market, you almost have to work backwards in partnership with your supply chain and say, look, we're going to have to squeeze more margin out of this somewhere, work with us. But at the same time, if you keep squeezing your supplier, they're not going to be around, right? And the important thing here, there's no point in having a great price and a great margin, and then you lose your one supplier that you've relied on, then you're kind of stuck anyway. So it's important to put the pressure on, but also do it in a way that's going to give some longevity and a good partnership as well going forward.
Well, yeah, you've got all the alternatives. I mean, we know from Brexit, right? It became harder, i.e., it was more expensive because of the logistic costs. The time factors had gone way through the roof in terms of importing goods, so people started to look inwards. Now we know, transport costs are going to be huge again because of fuel prices. Be aware of that cost structure. What's actually behind the price you're paying for a product? How much of that is transport, and can you get it cheaper overall from someone who's local and was previously more expensive? So that's why you went far afield to get some economy. Be aware of the pressures on your suppliers as well. And try and lock them in. I mean, we all wish that we'd signed up for fixed price tariffs for electricity, for 2 years ago, kind of thing. Try and fix your suppliers in for as long as possible.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And then that's the point of saying, right, I know I fixed for 6 months. I've got to have a pricing strategy that in 6 months' time, those costs are going to go up. What am I going to do with my sales price?
Yeah.
Am I going to continually just up the price, or am I adding extra value, or am I running some promotions? Whatever that is, because you can predict when those long-term price agreements are going to come to an end.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm embarrassed to admit that I only recently discovered that we're on an Economy 7 tariff at home, and we don't run anything during the night, which is what Economy 7 was initially set up for. And now I've changed it because we run everything during the day. We're actually paying less than we were. And I thought, I hadn't really thought what standard variable E7 actually meant, but so I'm embarrassed to admit now I do know, and I've changed it. But things like that. You when it's not a problem, you don't look at it. When it becomes a problem, you've got to look very carefully.
Yeah. And I think the other thing here is, if you're, ultimately, businesses are going to have to go and address the price they're charging for things in the market and talk to their customers. But you've got to have good visibility of everything that's going to impact your cost base and bring that into the equation. I think it's quite easy to go, oh, we've just suddenly got an increase in this and that, therefore let's go and put our price up. You agree a new price, and then something else lands and you go, actually, that's gone up as well. I think what businesses need to do is have good visibility about all of the cost base, all of the things that are impacting their products, and making sure they've got good visibility. I mean, Robert, you're all about the numbers, good reporting, having that kind of visibility. Any top tips for having full visibility that you would suggest people think about?
I think that obviously depending on the nature of your business, I would say, for Christ's sake, don't do an annual stock take and find that you've made a huge loss. Do your stock takes regularly.
Yeah.
Make sure you know exactly what you're using, what you're not using, what's a slow mover, what's a fast mover, what you're likely to run out of. It's all the common sense things that you tend to just take for granted while your headline on top sales number. Look at your stock, what you're holding. Can you, just in time? Well, that's got stretched a bit if you're importing from Europe. Yeah, but those kind of things, try and free up some cash from your stock.
Yeah,
if you can. The other side of that, of course, is if you want to buy in bigger quantities, that reduces the amount of logistics and deliveries. That's the decision that's, again, will be margin led. If you've got cash, use it, buy bigger.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, look, we're going to bring this to a close soon because we're running out of time. Nick, I just wanted to ask you for final thoughts. If anyone's listening to this or anyone's thinking, right, I need to look into my margin and improving it, what would be your top tips in terms of the things to go away and look at, just as a first stage?
I think the management team need to work extremely closely together. So the commercial director and the finance director need to get on. They need to communicate, and they need to be having these sort of discussions and really looking forensically at the cost of the business. And that's not just from a human resource perspective, but all the way through. And if the commercial director and a finance director are in constant discussion, looking at ways in which they can make the business more efficient, and then that's, in my view, got to be the answer.
And at the same time, keep communicating that message down to everybody. Everyone in the business got a role to play, right? It's just getting that message down and then measuring the result of that and making sure it's all going in the right direction.
Absolutely.
Right. Thanks, Nick, for sharing that. Robert, last comments on top tips to get
make informed decisions. Get all the data and do as much as you can to look over the hill what's coming towards you.
Yeah, I think that margin-led decisions is key, right? You have to have that data if you're gonna, and this is what I think everyone needs to think about: is this decision, is this action going to have the right impact on our margin? And that's the key, right? You've got to have the data and the visibility to make that kind of decision. But look, guys, we could be talking for ages on this, and I think it's a good time to bring this to a stop. So thank you so much for your contribution, and we will be obviously catching up on a couple of other discussions over the coming weeks as well. So thanks again, and we'll speak again soon.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like more information about the topics discussed in this podcast, then you can find us on our website at moveyourbusinessforward.com.